and welcome to the Bill Brief, the podcast where we break down legislation, what it says, why it matters, and how it could shape our communities. I'm your host, DJ William, and today we're covering H.R. 6644, the Housing for the 21st Century Act. This bill was introduced by Representative Mike Flood of Nebraska, and it was sponsored by Representative Jay French Hill. It was also proposed to House on January 15th, 2026, and it passed House, which is really incredible. So let's get into what this bill actually does. There are 8 key provisions that come with this bill, and we're going to delve into each one. So the first thing that this bill does is it expands federal financing for affordable housing. What this means is that it raises loan limits for Federal Housing Administration, also known as the FHA, insured mortgages specifically for multifamily homes. Okay, now I know that's a lot, so let's go a little bit into a background, right? Right now, the Federal Housing Administration has a maximum amount of money that it's going to insure for loans. This is basically a cap on how big a loan a developer can get when building apartments or affordable housing. This bill raises those caps. Why does this matter? Because developers who want to build affordable housing, they often say that their current loan limits are too low to cover modern construction costs, basically saying that it's too expensive to build a house right now and the loans are not enough. By raising the loan limits, the government is basically saying, we're going to back bigger loans so developers can build more units or bigger projects. This is a huge opportunity and it's truly incredible. So since the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, promises to repay the lender if the borrower defaults, lenders are more willing to offer the loans at affordable interest rates, right? So it just keeps housing more affordable. Okay, and under this same provision, it also uses a more accurate inflation index so loan caps can keep up with rising building costs, right? As we know, housing prices are increasing more and more. And if we have loan caps, they're going to keep up with the rising building costs when we have an accurate inflation index, when we have the correct numbers. So this bill providing that is really, really powerful. Okay, the second thing that this bill does is it increases income eligibility for HDU's home program. So HDU stands for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Under this provision, we can see that it allows more low-income households to qualify for help with building or rehabilitating housing. Right now in the status quo, it's mostly high-income households that qualify for that kind of assistance. So this bill allowing for that is just great. Okay. The third thing that this bill helps with is it creates new grant programs for housing planning. This would help regional, state, and even local governments design strategies to expand affordable housing. We all know that grant programs are very helpful, right? Especially ones that come with design strategies. The thing about this bill also is that there's no limitations. There's no, okay, this is how the grant programs are going to be. This is how it's going to work. No, it just allows for the creation of these grant programs. That's what's really important, and that's what's going to make a big impact. Okay, the fourth thing that this bill does is it exempts or frees certain housing activities from environmental review. Okay. Now, you can see me hesitating a little bit, and we're going to get into this when we talk about the counter arguments. Right now, I'm just going to explain what this does. This speeds up construction or rehab projects under specific conditions. Okay, so under specific conditions, it would just speed up construction. So we'll talk about that one a little bit later. Okay, the fifth thing that this bill does is it supports veterans. Veterans currently, a lot of them have disability benefits, and they don't count as income when determining eligibility for the VASH housing program, also known as the Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing, because individuals believe that, they already have disability benefits, they're already getting money, they shouldn't be getting any more, which is completely unfair premise. And this bill changes that. This bill gives them, it doesn't allow those disability benefits to count as income. when determining their eligibility. So that's really great. Okay, the sixth thing that this bill does is it launches a temperature monitoring pilot program. Okay, what is that, right? It grants to public housing agencies to make sure to test temperature sensors to ensure safe living conditions, right? Because believe it or not, it's very important that homes have the right temperature standards and that they meet these standards, because it can be really, really bad, especially for people with health conditions. So what it would do is it ensures that apartments don't get too hot or too cold, especially for the elderly, children, and people with health conditions. It would help public housing agencies prove that they're meeting required temperature standards. Okay. The seventh thing that this bill does, the seventh provision, is that it updates rules for manufactured homes. Basically, it removes the requirement that manufactured homes be built on a permanent chassis. So, okay, when I first was reading this, I was like, what is a chassis? So, a permanent chassis is the long, like, steel frame that's underneath the home. When homes are built, it's that steel frame that's underneath it, and it stays attached forever. So, right now, federal law says that manufactured homes must have that chassis. This limits how they can be built and delivered, right? So, if we were to change this by the passing of this bill, it would make it easier to modernize manufactured home designs. And most importantly, it could allow cheaper, lighter, or even like more flexible building approaches. It could make homes feel more like traditional housing instead of, other style construction that isn't very homey. And it could reduce construction and transportation costs. So this one is very, very beneficial. Okay. Um, and the last, I think this one is a little bit self-explanatory, but it increases, HUD oversight and transparency, because, public housing agencies must post contract information online, as said by this bill. The HDU can conduct performance reviews of housing counseling organizations, so making sure that everyone is following these standards, therefore increasing transparency, which is great. So those are all the main provisions of this bill. We can clearly see what they do, what this bill does, and how much of an effect it's going to have, how much of a good effect it's going to have. And that's what really, really is cool about this. Okay, so let's get into the positive implications and potential benefits of this bill. We spoke a little bit about them, but we're going to just dive a little bit deeper, mention something that we haven't mentioned already. First, more affordable housing gets built, right? You're increasing FHA loan limits. That makes it easier for developers to finance multifamily housing, right? Multifamily housing, there are so many people who live in these units. It's one building, many different units that help out various families all together. This is crucial, especially during a national housing shortage. Okay. Secondly, faster development timelines. Okay, this one is also, my hesitancy here. We're going to talk about this very soon. But when it says faster development timelines, that's because environmental reviews, they can delay projects by so long. It could be months, hopefully, fingers crossed. It could even be years. Could be years. So freeing certain activities can speed up construction without changing safety standards. But yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Okay. The third thing is that it helps more families qualify for support, right? It raises income limits for HUD's home program, which means low-income households can access assistance, In that same line, it supports veterans, right? Excludes disability benefits from income calculations, so more veterans can qualify for stable housing. It also improved tenant safety because of the temperature issues so this bill would help ensure that residents are living in safe, regulated indoor conditions, right? And it also creates greater transparency, and it modernizes outdated rules like the chassis to create cheaper and more affordable housing. So those are the main implications. Now let's get into the possible concerns and criticisms. Critics of this bill of HR 6644, they raise a few concerns. Now, throughout this whole thing, I keep saying, we're going to talk about the environmental review, and that is the biggest concern here, is because we're taking away that long process of environmental review just to speed up affordable housing. But some could worry that this could allow projects to move forward without fully considering environmental impacts, depending on how broad these exemptions are, right? So it could potentially backfire by having like hazardous, the goal of this bill is to keep, safe housing, like with the temperature thing, but this kind of takes away from that a little bit. This is all based on an if, though, if a fast environmental review were to go wrong. So it's not like, oh, this definitely will happen, but it's just something to think about. I also don't think that that gives us a reason, like a justification to not go through with this whole bill because of all of the positive things that this bill does do. Okay. A second concern / criticism that people have is maybe higher federal costs, right? Because more grants and expanded eligibility could increase HUD spending. This is because you're expanding who qualifies for housing programs, like increasing income limits. You're allowing for low-income households to qualify. Since this means that more people are receiving help, potentially the total amount of funding HUD needs is going to increase, because, HUD is going to give a lot of money to these low income households, to everybody else that's able to qualify, but then they're going to need more funding. And this is, something to definitely think about. It is a very, very true possibility. But come on, we have to help our low income households. It's so important, and it's unfair that they're not already qualified. So with this bill, allowing them to be qualified is what truly matters. That's what's really important. So we can worry about the funding for HUD later. Right now, we just want to make sure that everyone is being treated equally in the housing market, and that low income households are being qualified for this. So that's what's important first. Okay, this one is also it's a valid concern, right? It's saying that because of the manufactured home changes. So removing this permanent chassis requirement could raise questions about long-term durability or uniformity, right? You're removing that metal steel part that's underneath the home. So a lot of the homes are going to be different. There's not going to be much uniform. Now we don't know, like, was that chassis helping for it to be durable? Was, the house relying on it? So now we're getting rid of it. Are there going to be possible negative effects? This is all based on if, right? It's like, if this happens. So that's also like, there are so many benefits to this bill, and we should really just follow through with it, because these are all potentially like maybe this, maybe that. And you can say that about anything, but we can't ignore the great benefits that come with this bill, right? Okay. Now, the fourth thing is the oversight requirements, saying that, it may burden small agencies, again, with that may, that smaller public housing agencies may struggle to meet new reporting or transparency standards. This also makes sense that, it's hard for smaller public housing agencies. Maybe like those transparency standards that they were talking about posting all the time and making sure that every single thing is met, can be difficult. But again, that's not a reason to not pass this incredible bill, because I think it could have great impacts, and it can make a big difference. Okay, one of the last really big criticisms is inflation and construction costs, right? So critics are saying that increasing FHA loan limits could unintentionally contribute to rising construction prices, depending on the market. So since there would be higher loan limits, this means that developers can borrow more money per project. So when more financing becomes available, construction companies may feel comfortable raising prices, especially in tight housing markets, right? Because since there's more financing, construction companies are going to be like, okay, now we have more financing to build even better homes. So since these homes are a lot better quality, we have the power to raise the prices of these homes. That's basically what this is saying. And that if developers know that the federal cap is higher, they might build expensive units, just pushing up labor, pushing up material costs in that region. Again, it's based on a maybe, right? But it is very valid. These developers can think that, oh yeah, since we have more financing, we're going to make the homes a lot nicer, so people are going to have to pay more. Saying that, it's going to combat the affordability. But we know that, you're helping increase these loan limits. There's definitely going to be good impacts with the passing of this bill. So while a lot of these are very valid concerns, I think we should follow through with passing and then really see if an impact is going to be made, because I highly, highly, highly believe that it's possible. Okay. Now, before we finish off here, let's get into why this bill matters. Housing affordability is one of the biggest issues facing Americans, especially young people, families, and even the elderly. This bill, H.R. 6644, takes a multi-pronged, I love that word, multi-pronged approach, right? Because it expands financing, it boosts local planning, it supports veterans, it modernizes federal housing rules, it does all of it. Whether you rent, you own, or you're even trying to move out, changes like these could directly shape the availability and the cost of housing in your community. And that's what really matters. And that's where everything lies. So, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. That's the end of today's bill brief. So yeah, thank you so much for listening.